It is day one of Tour de Fleece, and I'm already sweating because I've been outside scouring fleece, and now I'm getting ready to spin some fleece. This is the hand-dyed braid that I would like to spin. This is from La Bien-Aimée, and it is their confetti, which is 50% merino, 30% Shetland, and then the other 20% is recycled fibers, which is all of these little fun bits you see. And these bits are recycled from La Bien-Aimé's yarn during their dyeing process. So that is really cool. This feels really nice. I'm excited to spin with it. One of the fleeces that I am processing is a Shetland, so I think it'll be fun to try out spinning Shetland for the first time, even though this is more merino than it is Shetland, but it'll still be nice to try it out. So I think I'm just going to spin this as a traditional 2-ply, and because there's not a whole lot of variation, I mean, actually I would say like pretty much no variation other than the confetti in the color, I am probably just gonna spin it end to end. So actually, before I do that, I do want to get some photos of what it looks like all braided up because I always like to see what the braid looks like before you spin and then as you spin, and then what the finished skein looks like. I think that's really fun when people share those things. Okay, I got the photo, and now I'm going to break this down. So first things first, just gonna undo the braid. And then I'm gonna do something that I haven't done in a really long time, which is just split this in half and spin each section and ply those together. Sometimes it's nice to just keep it simple, not overcomplicate it. I've done a lot of combo spins lately and sweater spins, and it's just kind of nice to like let the fiber do the work here, and I will just get to enjoy a very easy spin. Okay. I'm all prepped. Before I spin each one of these, I will probably just fluff out the fibers a little bit, which, if you're not familiar with that term, is literally just taking the fiber and kind of spreading it out this way. And it just makes it a little bit easier to draft. I am noticing that this section is wanting to split itself, and I will probably just like take that off and spin it and not try to like keep this whole thing together as I draft. And luckily, I don't think the color will be affected by that. So yeah, I'll just kind of manage that as I spin and adjust what I need to as I go. I have just a couple minutes before my scouring bath is ready to be switched over. So I'm gonna go show you what I have going on out there. I'm heating up about 3 gallons of water with this immersion water heater, and once this gets a little bit above temp to account for heat loss, I'll transfer about half of the water in this bucket to the other bucket. I heat the water to a little above 160, and then I scour at around 150, 160 Fahrenheit. Disposing of the scouring water is always a little bit tricky to figure out. My partner actually came up with this idea to use gutters, like house gutters, to distribute the water wherever we need it in our yard. You can see we live in a very dry climate, so water is very important here. And this also makes it really easy for me to pour from these heavy buckets, and so it works great. Here's a fully dried lock that I am getting ready to pick open, and you can see that it cleaned up beautifully. It's a pure white, all the lanolin came out, there's very little VM or any dirt left over, except for at the tips. The one flaw with this fleece is that it has weak tips, and the tips are trapping all of this dirt that just would not wash out. So what I'm doing before I pick the fleece is pulling off the tip of every lock, and you can see it just comes right off. And so once the tip has been removed and I've gotten all the little bits that are left over off, then I can go ahead and pick the rest of the lock open as you would normally. So the fleece that you just saw me processing is a CVM from Oregon. This has a staple length of about 4 inches, and then of course, as you saw, the tips are pretty weak, so it's pretty labor intensive to process. But once I'm able to get the tips off, the locks really just kind of fall apart and it picks very nicely. So although I did not know about the weak tips, I'm not too bummed about it because I'm really happy with like the quality of the wool outside of that. You can see here's a lock that I have taken the tip off of, and I mean the crimp is just crazy on this thing, and it really picks out into clouds. This is what it's like. So this is all ready to card. I haven't carded anything yet. I definitely would like to get some bats made up before the end of the tour. But let me show you what I've been able to process so far. So I have scoured 4 pounds of this 9-pound fleece so far. It's a very large fleece. And I have these 2 bags of washed wool that needs to be picked still. That is probably about 2.5 pounds. And so the rest I have completely picked and it's ready to card. And that is this big bag. This is a 10-gallon bag and it's completely full. Here's the second one. It's not quite as full, but there's still a lot of wool in there. And then I also have this basket, which is the same fleece, but it is all of the gray and like a little bit of tan fleece. So I saved a lock here so you can see, because this is a CVM, there is some color variation, although most of this fleece is that pure white. But here is a light gray, and I debated just mixing all of this together and processing it and just getting some variation in my bats. But the fleece that's not just pure white, so like the gray, like this might be hard to tell, but there's a little bit of tan in this clump. So the tan and the gray parts are a fairly different texture from the rest of the fleece. Like if I compare, I think you can kind of tell on camera that this has a larger crimp and it is just fuzzier, whereas this is softer with a smaller crimp. And so I just decided to keep these 2 different colors and 2 different textures separate, and it wasn't that hard to do. As I just scour everything together, and then once it dries I can kind of see the gray parts and I just like pull those clumps out. So that's what all of this is, and I'm just gonna make separate bats with anything that's not that pure white. Now my second fleece, I have not started picking open yet, but I've just washed some of it. I've washed a pound of it, and this is a Shetland. And so I'm just picking out some locks here for you to see. Shetland is a primitive breed and it's usually fairly coarse. This one is actually quite soft. So there's definitely some more coarse parts, kind of like the CVM, but a lot of this is very, very soft. I would say as soft, if not softer than the CVM, and you can see the color variation. So this fleece comes from the cutest little sheep I've ever seen. His name is Sean. He lives on a farm in Minnesota, and he's so small. His fleece in total was 2 pounds and 4 ounces, and here's 1 pound that I have washed. So you can kind of see the color variation there. I think I'm going to separate the color of his fleece as well, but I have not decided yet how I'm going to do that. Maybe once I start picking, I'll get a better sense of like how combined the locks are. Like I think some of this, where it's like the lighter tan and the darker brown, I think I would just leave all of this together but then I can definitely separate the white out. So I'm gonna have a lot of fun picking this one open. I'll probably continue working on the CVM for now because I've gotten my process down with removing those weak tips and making sure that those don't end up in the carder. That will definitely cause neps in the bats, so I'm removing all of it essentially. I'm removing as many tips as I can. And it's actually pretty easy to do because the weak ends are just coated in dirt that just would not come out. I scour very hot. I like to get my temps up to 160 to make sure that all of the lanolin has been removed from the fleece. I think one batch I tried 4 soaks of 160-degree water and the Beyond Clean, just trying to lift the dirt, trying to get rid of all the lanolin and get that dirt out. I also tried cold soaking. I tried soaking overnight. I tried soaking for several days. I tried massaging the tips in both cold and actually hot water as well because I was a little bit nervous about how I was gonna get these tips off. And I was just hoping that even if I felted the ends ever so slightly, that I could just at least remove the dirt, but it did not budge. Although honestly, now that I kind of have my process down, it is pretty streamlined to get those tips off, and I don't feel like I'm having a hard time. I don't feel like I'm fighting this fleece as I'm processing it. I'm very excited to see what it looks like carded up, and also very excited to work on my little Sean Shetland. I've started spinning on my EEW 6. I did have to dust her off before I got started, and you know, it's already kind of covered in little fibers already, but here is what I've been able to accomplish so far. Here's what I have left to spin of the first half of the braid. And you know, I am mostly having a good time. I'm really trying to not fight the texture that is happening here. I really love a smooth yarn, and I knew when I bought this bat or this braid that that is not what it was going to produce, and I wanted to kind of challenge myself and do something a little bit different. So sometimes I will stop and try to smooth that out as best as I can, and other times I will just let it be, let it exist in my yarn, and be okay with this being schlubby and very thick and thin and very textured. So far it's really wanting to spin up as what I think will be a worsted weight once I've plied it together. It's wanting to spin a little bit thicker than what my default is. I would say I typically spin as my default about a 2-ply sport weight, and this is definitely wanting to spin thicker, I think just because of those textured pieces. I'm liking the merino Shetland. The merino is very soft, but the Shetland helps give it a bit more tooth, so it is spinning well when I'm just spinning the fiber, like the base fiber. But yeah, as I come to those recycled fibers, sometimes my yarn will break because, as I mentioned, those fibers don't really draft. So if I don't spin it properly, if I get a little bit too thin, it really wants to break on those sections. So I do have to be like a little bit more cautious with it as I spin. And I'm not spinning this for any specific project. I do spin to knit a lot. I would say like 95% of my spin projects are things that I am spinning to knit with. I have a finished object in mind, and this I'm just spinning for fun and to see what kind of skein I create. So I think that's helping me be a little bit, I don't know, be I guess less like precise about it, less perfectionist about it, and I'm able to just kind of let it exist as it wants to be. In the third week, I want to card up some bats. That's going to be my goal. So first week, I would say, was a lot of scouring. Second week has been picking. And my third week, I want to do some carding. Okay, I just made my first test bat, and just look at that. This is 3 passes through my drum carder. Honestly, 2 looked really good, but I wanted to be fully sure that this was like as good as it could be. So this is 25 grams, so it's a little more than that just for carder tacks, but I actually really didn't lose anything to the carder, which seems crazy because I've been processing long wools and those just like get eaten up by your carder. So this is like such an easy process comparatively. So I'm going to spin part of this and just do like a little test spin. I'm still shocked that it's so white and so fluffy. Wool is just never going to not blow my mind. There are still like little, just like occasional pieces of VM in here, which I'm a little bit surprised by because I really didn't see those picking, and I picked very thoroughly, but I think that's just part of processing raw wool, especially hand processing. Like I'm not removing this that far from the farm. Now I get to spin this and see what it's like. Holy moly, this is so easy to spin. I've tried long draw once before, actually last Tour de Fleece, and I was trying it on my first ever bat, so like a woolen spun prep. And in retrospect, that bat probably wasn't the best thing to try long draw on because it was a bunch of different types of fiber all carded together. It was like all the leftovers and like recycled wool from fleece processing. Anyway, I feel like the difference between that experience and this, which is just like a single type of wool, I mean, I don't even know, like I wouldn't even say that CVM is like especially geared towards long draw. This staple length was, I think it was around 4 inches, I want to say, but it just carded up so nicely that it's like no matter how I want to spin it, it's going to work out well for me. And I would say with combed top, it's a little bit more of me like trying to keep control of it and do my best and kind of like fight it ever so slightly, whereas this just feels like it wants to draft. Like I don't know that I'm doing a whole lot here. I think a lot of people who get into woolen preps like stay in that realm once they get into it, and not to say that that's me, but I definitely understand why. Here's the first pass. Gonna do at least 2 more. Okay, I just took a lunch break. I'm drinking my favorite flavor of polar seltzer, orange vanilla. And here is what I have done so far today. I have three 50-gram bats. These are turning out really nice. They are so squishy, so I'm quite happy with what I've been able to get done today so far. For my next bat, I want to try something a little different. So I have this Corriedale in this beautiful sage green color, and I want to try mixing or blending the green with the CVM. So here I have just over 30 grams. I have about 32 grams of the CVM, and I'm going to blend in about 20% Corriedale. So that'll be about 6 grams of the green, and find out what that looks like. First pass, never looks good, but we're gonna keep going. So I'm just doing my typical thin layer. And then I'm just gonna take kind of like wisps of the Corriedale and lay that over. And for these like thicker sections of CVM, I'll just do the CVM on its own. And then I'll lay down a very thin sheet of the Corriedale, like that. And I'll just keep going slow. Okay, honestly, not bad for just like a first pass with the blending. It's definitely showing up more green in real life than it is on camera, but it's quite pale. You can see like some chunks of the Corriedale in there. So this is gonna need at least 2 more passes. And I think I'm gonna add about 3 more grams of the Corriedale just to make this a little bit more green. It came out paler than I figured it would with the 20%, so I'm just gonna up it to 30%. So I'm gonna do another pass and add this in as I go. Okay, I did an additional 3 passes, so I did 4 total, and I think I'm gonna call it good here. Sometimes I do struggle to get a clean pull. And look at that, just a tiny little green bean. I think you can definitely see the green if I hold it up to a white. So it's just very, very lightly tinted green. I think the Corriedale blended really well with the CVM. Okay, here is what I've done so far. This has taken me the majority of the day, but it is Saturday and it's the last day of Tour de Fleece. So I need to get to some spinning. I just made an iced coffee and I'm getting set up to ply the singles that I finished of my La Bien-Aimée braid. I think I finished these last weekend actually, but I just haven't had a chance to ply them. So I'm gonna start with that. I did also finish the first single of my long jaw test. And so if I have time, I would like to spin up the other single and then ply this as well, just so that I can have this count towards my Tour de Fleece total. Let's get to plying. According to physics, it is easier to ply if you have your singles far away from you. So there they are. And I need to not forget to turn my E-spinner to S. Ta-da! And ta-da! My 2 skeins that I finished during Tour de Fleece this year, my only skeins that I managed to spin, but honestly, I am proud of being able to finish them. This was a very unconventional TDF for me with how much stuff that I just had going on this month. And this was the only skein that I was committed to spinning, and I honestly wasn't sure that I was going to be able to finish it. So the fact that I was also able to spin a sample of one of the bats that I carded and processed all of the fleece and carded up those bats, I feel pretty proud and pretty happy with what I was able to accomplish. So I'm not even going to compare to last year, like it just doesn't matter to me. But I will still tell you the stats of what I was able to spin. So this skein is, I think, maybe around an Aran weight or a worsted. It's a little bit thick and thin just with the texture that was in this braid. And I came out with 96 yards. And this weighs 106 grams, or a little bit under 4 ounces, and it is 409 yards per pound, which I think does put it a little bit closer to the Aran weight. As I mentioned at the start, I did not have a plan for what I want this skein to become. I am thinking maybe a scarf or a shawl would be nice, or maybe used in the yoke of a sweater. So for now, I'm just going to put this on my shelf and save it for when the right project comes along. My little CVM skein ended up being, I think, about a sport or a worsted weight yarn. It's just a 2-ply. And this weighs 26 grams. It is very lightweight because it is woolen spun. So I got about 57 yards out of this, and it is just over 1,000 yards per pound. So maybe that puts it a little closer to a DK weight, but I am just extremely happy with how well this bat spun up. Fleece processing just takes hours and hours of manual work and sometimes strain, especially with removing all those tips from every single lock. I mean, it's been a lot of work to process this CVM, but for it to result in such a gorgeous skein makes it all worth it. And I'm quite excited to spin more. I'm not sure that all of these are going to be for myself, but I really want to try out spinning this CVM Corriedale mix and find out what that is like. Also, for some reason I was thinking TDF ended on Saturday, but then I realized it actually ended on Sunday. And so the day after I was filming, I carded up another bat and I mixed in this like rust color Corriedale, and this is how this one turned out. This one is like a full 50-gram bat, and it turned out really interesting. So I'm just really enjoying making bats right now, processing fleece, mixing fibers, blending colors together to see what I can get. And I have so much more fleece to card and also to wash and pick, and more fleece coming, because that is just what happens. That's who you become when you start processing fleece. You order more fleece before you're even done with what you're currently working on. So thank you for watching this year's TDF vlog. It was less of a spinning vlog and more of a fleece processing vlog, and I would say I probably only spun for maybe 7 days out of the full 3 weeks. But I truly am just happy that I was able to find that time to spin and still come out with a couple of skeins that I like. And of course, there will always be plenty of spinning in my future. So I'll see you in the next one. Bye.